Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Russo. I'm the editor of Funeral Service Insider, as well as the host of Funeral Service Insider, the podcast. You can find all of those things at Kates-Boylston.com if you are interested. We have a great presentation today. We'll have two speakers. We'll have two speakers. Each will take about an hour, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. We're not locked into time. One of the things that we do want to do, though, is allow you to ask questions as we go along. So there is a questions section in your bar there. You can see it on the side. Any question you ask, just go ahead and type them in there, and I'll collect them and ask them as appropriate. There will be a chance to ask questions after, but there's no need to wait. And once you have a question, just put it up there. If several people ask the same question, I'm likely to rephrase it and put them down and ask them as just one kind of more elaborate question, I guess. So first up, we are going to have Greg Norris, and he's going to be presenting the discipline of appointment setting, big choices, small impact. I'm going to bring Greg on now. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, Tony. Can you hear me now?
Chad, I didn't know if that was me or not. So I'm going to leave you on your own. I'm going to make you the presenter. So here you'll be able to get your screen shared. All right, okay. I'm going to get back. Next time you hear me, I'll be a disembodied voice with a question. Good luck.
Fantastic. Tony, first of all, let me just say thank you for inviting me to be part of today. I am really looking forward to it. And speaking about discipline of appointment setting is something that is a passion of mine. And so I look forward to speaking with all of you today, and any questions that you may have, I hope that you will just jump in. Let me tell you just a quick bit about myself. I started in this profession 31 years ago. And like many of you may be that are on this webinar today, I was a pre-need agent. And so when it came to appointment setting, I remember that very first time that I sat down at the telephone to make some phone calls. I'll never forget it. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'm not sure why I chose a Sunday afternoon to get started. I guess I wanted to get a jump on Monday. But I remember sitting there that very first time, staring at that telephone, thinking, what am I doing? Appointment setting and prospecting can be challenging. And I just learned that as I went on in my career, that it didn't matter how great I was at giving a presentation or how good I was at overcoming objections. If I didn't discipline myself to do the prospecting and set the appointments, I wasn't going to have those opportunities. And so having discipline and appointment setting, that, as I said, is just kind of near and dear to my heart. I spent many years working with families and helping them plan a better farewell. And so I hope that maybe some of the things that I say today will help you do the very same. As we get started here, I want to just take you on a very brief journey. So if you'll just pretend with me for just a moment, as I said, we're going to take a little bit of a flight. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Greg Norris, your captain. I really appreciate you choosing our airlines to fly today on your journey from Los Angeles to New York City. As we begin the landing process, I just have a very quick announcement to make. In the planning for this, I made a very small 1-degree error in my flight plan. And so instead of landing in New York City, we're going to land in Delaware. I hope this doesn't create too much of an inconvenience for you. Once again, I thank you for choosing our airline to fly today on your journey. We hope that as you have other flights in your near future, that you will choose us to fly again. Have a great day. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but if I had been on that flight and heard that, I'm sure I would not be having a great day. I would be quite angry, as a matter of fact. I fly quite a bit in my job. Oftentimes, I have someone waiting for me at the airport to pick me up. We have appointments right after that, and so if I ended up at a completely different location than what I originally planned on, it would really put things in a tailspin, so to speak. However, I I contend that oftentimes each and every one of us do simple things like this that throw us off in a way that we really don't realize. And a few years ago, I read a book called The Compound Effect. I wish I could tell you that story I just told you was something that I made up, but it isn't. I actually read it in The Compound Effect. And the whole premise the whole premise behind the compound effect is that small, smart choices done consistently over time make a radical difference. Now, I'm going to use that flight as an example. If a 1 degree error had been made and they were just going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference at all, if any. If they were going to Kansas City, it would make a little bit of a difference, but not a lot. But because they flew a longer distance, it was done over a longer period of time and more miles. Instead of landing in New York, they landed in Delaware. Can you only imagine if they were going to another country across the ocean, how much difference that would have made? It would have been a much longer time period. That is the result of a negative problem. However, we are going to talk about making smart choices, positive choices, and the effects of that over a long period of time done consistently. And so, as we get in today, there are 3 things that we're going to talk about. And the first thing that we're going to discuss are choices that we make when it comes to appointment setting. What I want to talk about, first of all, is that when it comes to being a pre-need agent, as many of you are, and that's really what I'm speaking to today, are pre-need agents. But when it really comes down to it, we have 2 jobs. Number one, we need to be prospecting. And when it comes to prospecting, there are so many ways these days to prospect and be effective. Many years ago, did a lot of telephone calling. And we still do some phone calling now, but there's other ways as well. For example, out in the field, you can be out calling on churches, on other groups like the Lions Club, the Eagles Clubs. A lot of cities have a local seniors group that they have where people go to have entertainment and things like that. And oftentimes these groups, whether it be a church or some of these other clubs, they are looking for speakers. And so going and speaking to those organizations and planning opportunities where you can have community seminars or community events and group seminars, that can be a very effective way to prospect. Text messaging is something else. We've quickly learned that people prefer to communicate by text message. And so texting sometimes rather than phoning, especially when you're following up or texting them ahead of time and letting them know you're going to call them, oftentimes that can really help the effectiveness of the phone calls because they know that you're going to be calling and to be expecting that rather than screening their calls. So texting can be a great way of prospecting as well. The other job that we have is to be on an appointment. And I think we need to really look at these 2 jobs and look at every decision that we make throughout a day based on these 2 things, either prospecting or on an appointment. When we're on an appointment, it can be a one-on-one presentation, whether it's at the funeral home or whether it's at the customer's house. Or whether it's a group presentation. Maybe you've planned that at a local restaurant. They have a private room and you've booked that, or another community center. But being on an appointment or prospecting, really when it gets down to it, are the only 2 jobs that we have And it's really helpful if we filter the choices that we make through this lens of it, does it affect one of these two things? And so let's talk about some of the decisions that we can make as we go through the day. First of all, we can boost our outreach. For example, I have here making 5 more prospecting calls in a day. So let's just say, for example, it's a beautiful Wednesday afternoon today, and you've had 2 appointments already. And let's say you've been successful and you've had some sales. It's been a fantastic day. And now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You've got a choice. Go home, enjoy the rest of the afternoon, enjoy the success that you just had, call it a day. Okay, you can do that. Or you could also say, yes, I've had some success, but I'm going to take a little bit more time and I'm going to talk to 5 more people today. I will show you the power of that in just a few moments. Another choice that we need to make is limiting our distractions. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I think I'm just going to look at my notifications on social media and just see what's going on. 30 minutes later, I have found that I am still scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is. It can really take a big part of our time. What could you have accomplished in that 30 minutes of time that you spent scrolling? We need to learn to limit those distractions. And there's many different ways of doing that. It just comes down to a matter of choice. Maybe we don't look at social media during productive hours of 9 to 5 and only do it in the evenings or early mornings. I don't know, however you choose to do that, but we really have to limit those distractions that we have. Schedule proactively. One of the things that was important to me that I'll demonstrate here in just a little bit, that you really need to allocate some dedicated time for prospecting. I had 2 very dedicated times to prospecting. One was a Tuesday evening. That was a time that I always set aside. It was an appointment with myself so that I could make appointments for Wednesday and Thursday and potentially Friday mornings. Another big time that I set aside for myself was Saturday mornings, because I like to book my Mondays and Tuesdays just as full as I could get them. But those 2 times were dedicated times for prospecting. Maximizing aftercare. Aftercare has become one of the leading lead generation programs for effective pre-need programs. There are many different types of aftercare. Everything from a text-based aftercare program to more of the traditional type where the agents maybe go out with a nice folder. They present to them laminated obituaries. They work with the families and go over maybe a survey as to how satisfied they were with the services that they received. There's a checklist oftentimes that talk about everything that needs to take place in order to close out an individual's estate. There's many different great aftercare programs out there, but implementing aftercare can really have a very big impact on your pre-need program at your funeral home. Something that we've learned, there's a study that Homesteaders puts out every couple of years called Preneed Motivators. And we've learned that a death is one of the leading reasons. It is the number 1 reason that people choose to prearrange, because they've had a death of a loved one or a family member. And so having an aftercare program to stay in contact with those families that you've served can be very, very important. We also know that 27% of new policy owners were widows. And so again, having that aftercare program to maintain that relationship is very, very important. And one other key reason that aftercare is important is that we also learned in Preneed Motivators that people that shop, which a lot of people say they're going to shop, but we learned that 74% of people only went to one funeral home. However, those that did shop more often had experience, they had prior experience in a funeral. And so I don't know why that is, but that's why we need to, when we're serving our families, make sure that we're taking care of them to the very best that we can, and then maintaining that relationship after the funeral so that the last communication with them is not the bill. That can really have a big impact on not only your funeral home, but your pre-need efforts as well. Expanding your network. Present to community organizations. There are all kinds, as I mentioned a little bit ago, talking to group seminars, having community events. That was when I was speaking to the prospecting or being on a call or being on an appointment. But being involved with those community organizations can be very big. Partnering with other professionals such as financial planners, those that specialize in maybe attorneys that specialize in senior issues, accountants that specialize in senior issues, healthcare professionals. If you can become the go-to person for those organizations, then you can help each other with leads and things like that. And oftentimes when you have a community presentation or a group seminar, you can partner with these other organizations, and that can really help expand your network, expand your reach, because you will benefit from the audience that they have, and they will benefit from yours as well. So what I want to do here, the first thing that I talked about was expanding your outreach and talking to 5 more people every day. And so let me just show you what happens if we do that. So let's just assume that it takes 10 conversations to set one appointment. And you've decided that Monday through Friday, you're going to talk to 5 more people a day than you normally would. And so if you did that, that's going to equal about half an appointment per day. Half an appointment per day would equate to about 3 more appointments throughout the week. 3 appointments for the week, assuming that you have a 50% close ratio, would give you approximately 1.5 sales per week. 1.5 sales per week equates to 6 extra sales per month. 6 sales per month at an average contract size of $5,000 would give you $30,000 worth of extra volume that you had written. Many of you will have contract sizes much larger than $5,000. Some of you might be a little smaller. You just need to adjust your numbers here. But this is a good example of what 6 sales at $5,000 per month or $5,000 per contract would do for you. $30,000 per month over the year equates to $360,000 of extra volume that you would have written. And $360,000 of annual volume at an average of 8% commission gives you an average income for that year, an additional income over what you are already making of $28,800. I don't know about you, but I could do a lot of things with $28,000. The last thing that it does, and maybe one of the most important things that it does, is that it's helped 72 additional families on a very difficult day. Having those 5 more conversations, it's helped everyone win. It's helped the funeral home win because more people were reached and more people planned their funeral with that funeral home and their services that the funeral home will realize in the future. It helped the agent because they sold more, they made more. And so it's been financially beneficial to the agent. And then it's also been very beneficial to the families because now a very difficult day in their life is going to be much easier. So everybody won by you making a small decision to simply talk to 5 more people every day. But let's look at this one more way. What if we didn't make 5 additional calls a day, but we just spent one more day per week prospecting, and we just had 10 conversations in that time? If we just had 10 more conversations in the week, that gives us one more appointment per week, giving us 2 more sales per month. Again, assuming that we have a 50% close ratio. 2 more sales per month gives us an extra $10,000 in our production volume for the month. $10,000 in the month equates to $120,000 annually. At an average of 8% commission, that gives you an extra $9,600. And look at that as a bonus, maybe a Christmas bonus. Who wouldn't like an extra $9,600 for the year? But again, more importantly, you've helped 24 additional families be prepared for one of the worst days of their life. Once again, everybody came out a winner. The funeral home, you as an agent, and your families came out a winner, all because you made a simple choice, a small choice, to talk to a few extra people every single week. The second thing that we're going to talk about today is routine. In the book, The Compound Effect, Darren Hardy makes the statement, a daily routine built on good habits and disciplines separates the most successful among us from everyone else. And a routine is exceptionally powerful. So let's talk just a little bit about routines. And I've already mentioned a little bit about the routine that I used to follow. So I'm going to look at this particular week here, and I encourage you, we're going to look a little further at using a CRM system to help you track your results and hold yourself accountable. And this is what a calendar for the week would look like using our CRM system. And whoever your provider is, they may have a great CRM system for you to work with. There are many CRM systems out there available to everyone. And I encourage you, if you are not using a CRM system to manage your leads, I strongly encourage you to use one. So I want to talk a little bit about the routine that I used to follow. And I'm going to start backwards here because my week would really begin on Saturday. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a morning person. I enjoy getting up early in the morning. I enjoy the quiet of the morning. Most of my family, they all enjoyed sleeping in. And so it wasn't difficult for me to set aside a Saturday morning to do some prospecting. Now, did I start early? No, I did not. I would work from about 9 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my goal was to set up my Monday and my Tuesday just as full as I could get them. I always tried to set up to where I set and run my appointments somewhere within a 24 to 48 hour period of time. I just found that way I had less people forget that I was coming or people cancel on me. So that just tended to work really well if I could set and run them fairly close together. So on Saturday, my goal was to fill my Mondays and my Tuesdays as full as I could get it. Now, Monday, I would set appointments every 2 hours if I could. And there were many times I did. And I would even have an evening appointment on a Monday. And in the summertime, when it's light out longer, I could even have 2 evening appointments, maybe a 6 o'clock and an 8 o'clock because it stayed light out longer than it does in the wintertime. And so Monday evening was dedicated to some evening appointments. Tuesday, I would run appointments throughout the day, but Tuesday evening was set aside. That was my appointment with myself to prospect, to make appointments for later on in the week. Now, remembering that we only have 2 jobs, there were in-between times. So let's say that I had initially set up on a Monday, I had a 9 o'clock, an 11 o'clock, and maybe a 1 o'clock appointment. But let's say my 11 o'clock appointment canceled on me. That was a great time to just do some additional prospecting during that time that I had set aside for the appointment that canceled. So again, remember, we need to either be on an appointment or doing something to, or being on one or doing something to create one. And as long as every decision we make is looked at through that lens and we're focusing all of our activities doing one of those two things, we're going to be very successful. Now, in this particular routine here, I always set aside Wednesday evenings as a family night. My boys were involved in something similar to Boy Scouts, and I was one of the leaders of that. So I did not work on Wednesday evenings, but I did run evening appointments again on Thursday. On Friday, I would have some morning appointments, but because I worked on Saturday, oftentimes I took Friday afternoons. I took it off early so that I could spend some extra time with my kids before we got into the weekend. That was my routine. But my routine doesn't have to be yours. We just need to figure out something that works for you. I have worked with many organizations that have different routines. For example, one that I've heard frequently and that's very successful is 10 before 10. In other words, they come into the office every morning and they have 10 conversations with people before 10 a.m. and they set their appointments up for that day or the next day. However you choose to have a routine is completely up to you, but I encourage you have a routine that you follow. And I would encourage you in your routine, especially in your appointment setting routine, to have some times built into your schedule where you are meeting with people outside of the times of 9 to 5. Because if you can do that, you're going to reach some younger ages. And when you're reaching some of those younger ages, you will also be able to give yourself a bit of a pay raise. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. But having that routine is very, very important, whether you have one similar to what I have, or maybe it is that 10 before 10 every single day, and your mornings are dedicated to prospecting and your afternoons are dedicated to to being on your appointments. However that works, whatever works for you, have that routine, and like I say, be flexible with it so that hopefully you can have some appointments outside of the normal 9 to 5 business hours.
Just hello, just real quick.
Yeah.
We have a question about whether there's such a thing as like varying. Is it still a routine if it's different from week to week? Like if you, I guess, do you have to do the same routine every week is the, I guess, question that's been asked.
Well, I guess my knee-jerk reaction to that would be if we're doing something different every week, is it really a routine? That might be the first thought that I have. Now, secondly, I suppose, I want to take that as looking at it as a learning experience. So let's say you follow a particular routine in a given week and you see you're maybe just not having the success that you'd like to have. And so, of course, I think having that routine can always be an evolving process to where you're making changes as you go. And over time, you will learn a routine that works well for you and probably one that you're going to stick with on a regular basis.
Excellent. And I see that the title here is habits. So I probably could have held that question for another minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that all for now?
Yeah, that's all I got right now. But remember, anybody else has any questions, please just write them in the question. I would say we do have a comment here. I would say set a block of time, so many hours prospecting. That's the suggestion from the assembled.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. The third thing we're going to talk about now are habits. So John Maxwell makes the statement, you will never change your life until you change something you do daily. And I'm going to add to his statement here. It not only needs to be daily, it has to be very intentional. I just learned a long time ago that to break habits, bad habits, is something we have to do regular. It has to be very intentional, very daily. He goes on to say that the secret of your success is found in your daily routine. So we're going to talk about some techniques for installing good habits. Number one, let's set ourselves up to succeed. Um, I don't know about you. Something I enjoy. I do enjoy being very physically active, and I belong to my local gym. My gym is about, I don't know, 6 miles from my house, not very far. It's very convenient for me to go. If I were to join a gym that were 20 miles away, it would be really easy to convince myself that I didn't want to make that trek to go there. But because it's close and because I pass it a lot as I'm going around town, running errands and things like that, if I don't go, it makes me feel a little bit guilty. It reminds me that I need to be there. Well, you, in order to be successful at having good appointments, you also need to set yourself up for success. And so know when to set your appointments. What are your productive times? Our productive hours when it comes to appointment setting and running appointments typically is 9 to 5. However, we're learning that, again, I'm going to reference this Preneed Motivators study that we've done. It indicated that people that prearrange typically fall between the ages of 70 and 84. The ages of 70 to 84 are the ones that are going to be home from 9 to 5 every day for the most part. If you want to lower your age, and if you are a pre-need agent, you know that when an individual is younger, you're going to make a little bit more commissions oftentimes. If you want to give yourself a pay raise, you need to be able to make yourself available during off hours other than 9 to 5. And that was one of the reasons that I ran appointments on Monday evenings and Thursday evenings, because it gave me those opportunities to reach those people who were still in my target audience, but yet they were younger and potentially still working. So knowing your productive hours, typically 9 to 5, but if you want to give yourself just a little bit of a pay raise, expand that a little bit and have some appointment times other than 9 to 5 during the day. Another thing to set yourself up for success, as I mentioned a little bit ago, is setting and running your appointments within about 24 to 48 hours. If it starts expanding out too much more than that, your chances for people to forget or to cancel are a little bit higher. I've often been asked here, should you send a reminder? Should you call them and confirm your appointment? Calling and confirming an appointment was something I typically didn't do. However, if the appointment was set much further than the 48 hours, oftentimes I would send a postcard just to remind them. Nowadays, with the power of cell phones, text messaging, as I referenced a little bit ago, is also powerful. You can send a text message. I had 2 vehicles at my house detailed. I had a mobile detailer come, and the day before, I got like at least 2 messages from them just reminding me of my appointment and things that I needed to do in order to be ready for that. And we often get those types of reminders from our doctors and from our dentists and things like that. And so if you're wanting to confirm some of your appointments, and especially if they have been set too much further than 48 hours out, a text message could be a great way to do that if that's something you choose to do. Another thing that I always recommend is try your very best not to sell during the appointment setting phase. There are times when you are talking to someone and they're going to just start asking you a lot of questions, such as, what does a funeral cost? What is a monthly payment? If you start diving too deep into that during the appointment setting phase, then you eliminate the reason for them to meet with you at all. And so you want to try to have a way to avoid being in that selling phase when you're setting the appointment. And one of the things that I used was, and I've heard them called different things. I use what's called a family record guide, but it was simply a form that I filled out that had all of the information for the people that they were going to need, that the funeral home was going to need for death certificates, for obituaries, for general funeral service information. And I would fill that out for them. There was no charge for that. We kept it on file at the funeral home. And then I would let them know that if they had any other questions about funeral planning, that I would answer those while I was with them. And I really tried to stick with that. I've also heard of personal planning arrangement guides, things like that. There's all different types of forms that are similar to this that can be used, but really try to keep it to where you're not getting into that selling phase during the appointment setting. Otherwise, as I said, you will eliminate the reason for them to meet you. Give a couple of time options and not just open-ended. This is something that actually it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I've heard this so many times. Someone will approach you at the grocery store and they will say, you know what, I know that I've needed to come see you and get my arrangements taken care of. And our response oftentimes is, well, just stop by the funeral home. I'm there. Well, that says a couple of things to me. First of all, we are licensed professionals and we're working every day focused on our two jobs, either prospecting or being on an appointment. And quite often, if they just happen to stop in, they're going to miss you. And so if they miss you, then, you know, that doesn't necessarily look very good. And I often think of this as we're just like any other licensed professional. If you went to the grocery store and maybe you were having a terrible pain in your leg and you saw your orthopedic doctor there and you said, I really need to come see you. My leg is really hurting me. And the doctor just said, well, I'm there. Just come see me anytime. All right. What would you think of that doctor? To me, that would say that nobody goes to see him because his time is just open, and so I probably that's not the doctor that I want to go see if he's that available. And so we need to think about that we are licensed professionals, and something that you can do that's so simple on your business cards. I'm seeing a lot of sales professionals on their business cards on the back. They will have a date slot and a time slot. And when you have those opportunities and people see you, rather than just saying, well, just come see me anytime, pull out one of your business cards and do just like that, like it happens at the doctors, and put a date and decide a specific time right there. But the same thing goes when you're talking to people on the, whether it's on the phone or whether it's a group seminar and you're setting appointments afterwards. Give a couple of time options and not just open-ended like that. Make sure that the decision makers are going to be there. If they are married, you want their spouse to be there. That's very important. We've all heard the saying of a one-legged appointment. If it's a one-legged appointment, they're not going to be as successful because these are decisions that oftentimes a husband and a wife or, you know, a couple are going to make together. Another one is sometimes it's important to have children there. And I'll give you an example. My grandmother was widowed, and my father, her son, handled most all of her money. He handled her checkbook. He paid her bills. And so if someone had called her and set an appointment and maybe didn't ask if she needed anyone else to be there, and they met only with her, her response would have been, I need to talk to my son. He handles my money. Whereas if we had just simply asked the question when we were setting the appointment, maybe asked a couple of clarifying questions and said, you know, Mrs. Jones, are you married? And if the answer is to that is yes, will your spouse be able to be there as well? If they're not married, do you have children, or do you have another family member that would need to be there that we can all talk about this together? Asking those clarifying questions and making sure that the decision makers are there is very, very important and can really help you when you're in your appointment and up your opportunities to make that sale. The second thing that's going to help us create good habits is to think about addition and not subtraction. So, for example, let's say that we're on a diet and we decide that we're going to make some changes in our life. We can either look at this as all of the things, we can focus on all the things we can't have, and that could be really depressing, or we can look at all of the things that we can have. They're just maybe different than the things that we can have. So let's look at what we can do, not at what we can't do. So when we talk about the add-in principle, I'm going to use here the example of maybe you want to qualify for a trip. I think most every pre-need provider out there has some type of trip that you can qualify for. And for example, these are just the 2 trips that our agents are working for 2025 that they'll go on in early 2026. And so when we look at the add-in principle, let's define our goals. What is it that we want to achieve? So let's just say, for example, you want to go on your pre-need provider's annual trip. And so when we look at this, I'm just going to use ours for an example here. In order to go to Puerto Vallarta, which is what we call our leaders conference trip, that's our bigger trip, then the agent is going to need to write in the neighborhood of $834,000 of net face amount in order to qualify. We actually go by a point system. However, this would just be, I would say maybe worst case scenario here, without getting into how the point systems work. But this is about the volume that you would need to write in order to qualify for that trip. And in order to go to our Homesteaders Club trip, for example, you would need $667,000 in net face to do that. So let's just say that you want to give yourself some room to that bigger trip, and so you make $900,000 your goal. If we just look at $900,000 in a year of pre-need, that can seem rather daunting. And we can let that discourage us, much like thinking about the things that we can't have when we're on a diet. But let's look at this a little different. Let's break it down and see what we do in this situation here for the month. $900,000 for the year is $75,000 for the month. And if we divide that by the number of weeks, it's really only $17,442 in volume per week. And so then if we take that and divide that by $5,000, for example, an average contract size, that is about 3.5 contracts per week. And so when we break it down like that, then it doesn't look so bad. It's very manageable. It's very attainable. And so if you have a big goal like this that you're wanting to achieve, let's break it down into small, bite-sized pieces that make this to where you're not just seeing the big picture, but you're focusing on what you need to do every week. And it definitely will be more challenging. It will be more encouraging for you, and it won't be as daunting. So think addition, not subtraction. Go for PDA. And I'm not talking about affection here. I'm talking about public display of accountability. Share your goals, no matter how big they are. If you have a manager, report to your manager every week how your performance has measured up to the goals you've set. That is really, really important. If your manager doesn't know what you need to achieve every week, they're not able to help you. They may not know that you're struggling. And so sharing your goals with your manager and having some performance metrics in place can be very helpful. So for example, let's talk about some of those metrics. This is something that I used to do as an agent, and we would call in every Thursday evening and we would report on these 4 benchmarks. We didn't have to hit them all. we only needed to achieve at least one, but you will quickly learn if you have benchmarks like this and you're working to achieve all four, you will achieve at least one of these. And so we would set a volume goal for the week. And you can see in this case, it's what we need for the week in order to go on the trip. Or we needed 7 appointments because, again, assuming you've got a 50% closing ratio, in order to have 3 contracts, we need to have 7 appointments that are solid that we actually go on. The other thing that we measured was 3 contracts. Maybe you didn't have 7 appointments, but you did a great job closing that week, and maybe you only had 5, but you still had your 3 contracts. That's fantastic. Or if we didn't hit any of those, we wanted to at least have 100 contacts for the week. So again, set some benchmarks, some small goals that you can attain, and be accountable to those, and be willing to report those to your manager as to the success that you're having, or maybe the challenges that you're having. I'm going to further talk about accountability. Again, I want to mention to you that having a CRM system can really be beneficial to you. In this situation here, this is showing the power of quality notes. And where that can really be helpful is that sometimes you're going to be on appointments and maybe you're not going to close it. Maybe you need to follow up with them in 2 weeks. Maybe you've spoken to someone on the phone and they want to set an appointment, but they just don't know what their schedule is going to be over the next few days and they need you to follow up with them a week later. But having these notes, recording what you talked about in previous conversations can be very helpful to remind you. It's hard to remember every conversation that we have. And these notes that you record in your CRM can help you, number one, be accountable to not miss people that you're supposed to follow up with. If you don't have some system of tracking, it's too easy for people to fall through the cracks. And so having a CRM system where you can track your appointments that you've had, where you can keep track of your notes, that reminds you of people to follow up with, this can be a powerful tool to use for accountability and keeping you focused with following one of those 2 jobs, either being on an appointment or setting an appointment. This is another great reporting tool that can be available to you most likely on your CRM. You put your benchmarks in there. It's going to track to you. It's going to show you how many sales that you've had for the month, how many appointments have held, how many policies that you've sold. There's so much information that whatever CRM you're using will be able to provide to you if you're putting good information into it. It tracks how the sales you've made by lead source. So many things here that you can learn and keep track of. And again, when you are reporting to your manager, this is great information for them to have. Fuel your success. Connect and collaborate with someone who shares your drive for positive change. Do you have a friend, a coworker? Maybe it's someone that you don't work with, but they're in a similar type of profession, and it's someone that you can collaborate with and motivate each other to do better, to hit your goals and things like that. I know just in my personal life, I have a good friend and we meet every week and we talk about what our goals are and things that we're having challenges with. And he really challenges me to do better and I challenge him to do better. And having that someone who shares your drive for positive change can really be helpful to you. Embrace a personal challenge. It's just like, for example, you want to run a half a marathon. You don't just start by running a half marathon. You start with a couch to 5K. And so embrace a personal challenge like that will help you. You start small and you work up. And so maybe there's some things that you can do to challenge yourself, maybe a gift or something like that. Maybe managers, and you're trying to motivate your salespeople. Have a challenge. If they sell 2 extra Preneed that week, there's something involved in that as a reward. And then, of course, when we achieve those challenges, celebrate the milestones, no matter how big they are, and have a little bit of fun with this. You know, something that I want to just encourage all of us as I wind things up here, creating new habits, it takes time. We didn't create bad habits in a short period of time. They were something that we kept doing over and over and over again until they just became part of our everyday life. And it took time for that to happen. The same thing when we're creating positive habits, it takes time. And I want to encourage you, don't beat yourself up too much when you make a mistake. We all make mistakes. I've caught myself so many times saying, "Oh gosh, Greg, that was so stupid. Why did you do that? You're an idiot." I, Talking to ourselves like that does nothing to help us. We're just creating a positive, or defeated mental outlook. And so I want to encourage you, be patient with yourself. It takes time to build new habits, and give yourself time, and be kind to yourself in the process. So I want to ask you, what three things can you maybe think of and commit to doing every day? What choice, maybe a different choice, can you make? What new routine can you possibly create? Maybe what new habit do you want to instill? Are there three things that you can think of that you could potentially commit to every day that will have a positive impact on your day, on your week, your month, your year, or just your life overall?
I'm going
Just
to
want
just
to encourage you. Yes.
sorry, I didn't want to let you get too far. First of all, if anybody wants to type them in the questions section, I'd be happy to read them out loud. But we do have a question from someone, and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, so I apologize in advance. But it says, "What is the name of the CRM that you use?"
Engage.
And
Our CRM is called Engage, and as I said, that is what we have at Homesteaders. There are others out there as well. I encourage everyone to talk to their pre-need providers as to maybe what they may have, one that they use or have one that they recommend. But we use Engage.
they say thank you. And on a next level up kind of question, are there any suggestions to keep an agent motivated and to keep them striving for those goals?
Oh goodness, there's all kinds of things. And for example, as a company, there's things that we do. I would say the trips that we offer are something that can be a motivation. And so I encourage those, whatever pre-need provider they're using, see what type of motivations that they have. Those are just a couple of examples that Homesteaders has. There are other things that can be done on a local level, that a funeral home can do with their own pre-need staff. There are different maybe bonuses that they can earn, or extra cash that they can earn if they turn in so many extra leads into the CRM, or if they improve their sales. I'll tell you something that worked well for me when I was an agent. This was many years ago, but if within a 2-week period of time, I wrote $15,000 worth of volume, then I got a 1% bonus. If I brought that up to $20,000 in that 2-week period of time, I got a 2% bonus. If I wrote $25,000 or more within that 2-week period of time, I got a 3% bonus. And so that was always my goal, was to write $25,000 or more in that 2-week pay period, so that I could earn the maximum amount of extra bonus that I possibly could. So there's all kinds of things that can be done, as motivators, to keep yourself excited about what you do. I hope that helps.
Excellent. One of the responses, yes, it says much appreciated. Another response to the question is, I plan to set a schedule that allows for phone calls and reaching out on a more consistent basis.
Fantastic. That's awesome. I love that you're willing to share that. Thank you. But as we close, I just want to remind you that having that, the formula for success here is looking at the choices, the decisions we make every day, the routines we're following, and that repeated actions in the way of habits, when we compound those and do them over time, you're going to hit that target every time if you're making positive choices. So go out there, be successful, and I look forward to hearing from some of you as to the successes you're having.
Excellent. And thank you
Tony, are
so
there
much.
any additional questions?
Right now, it looks like yes, there is. What's your best practice for asking for referrals?
Oh goodness, there are so many ways of asking for referrals. The biggest thing is that you hear all the time is that you don't get the referrals, you just don't ask, and so we just can't be afraid to ask. I just heard the other day, as a matter of fact, that one of our agents, he's our number one agent, as a matter of fact, when he meets with families, he will make a statement, something I'm probably going to crucify it, but he makes a statement similar to this. I know we have limited time, and normally I ask, if you can, share 5 to 6 people that, you feel like might help this, but our time is limited. Would you be able to just share 3 names? And so it kind of looks like he's given a little bit of a break, or doing, making it a little easier for him. He has a huge amount of success with that. A lot of people are very happy to help him out. And, just being willing to ask, just don't be afraid to ask. I think that's the biggest thing is fear within us, is that people are going to say no. But, if we can if we've done a good job with that family and they felt comfortable enough to purchase their pre-needs from us, then to be able to just say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, obviously this is something that worked well in your planning for the future, and I appreciate this opportunity to meet with you and the trust that you placed in me. And I'd really like to be able to provide this maybe to some of the friends and all that you have. Do you have any friends that maybe you've talked about this as a group, that you would be willing to share their name with me, and I can provide to them the very same type of service that I've provided to you? So, just making a simple statement like that, can oftentimes set people at ease and make them willing to share names.
Excellent. Oh, we got another one. Focus on the clubs that your customer is part of. Your referral could be to set a speaking engagement with their group. So Elks clubs, Rotary, Ruritans.
Yes. And, something else, oftentimes when we think of group seminars, community seminars, things like that, we think big. We think it needs to be with the church, or it needs to be with the club. I had an appointment, I'll never forget it. It was with a funeral home in California, actually. And one of the things that they told me is that they do group seminars, but they're much smaller. So, for example, I talked a little bit ago about the importance of having all the decision makers at the appointment. So let's just say you're dealing with a widow. Sometimes there's strength in numbers, and people feel more comfortable when they have someone with them. And so in this particular situation, the funeral home would just ask them, do you have a group of ladies or people that maybe you play cards with, that you socialize with? And if you're willing to set the appointment and invite your friends, that's a great referral right there. If you can get them all to come about, if you'll invite your friends, I'll bring the pie. If you'll put on a pot of coffee, I'll bring the pie, and we'll just make it a time of it right there at your house. And they had tremendous success with that. There are so many ways to get those referrals to the community seminar. They don't always have to be big. They can be something smaller like that too. So just think about things a little differently.
All right. And that looks like that will do us. Thank you so very much for your time. Do you have a slide with all your contact information on it?
You know what? I apologize. I should have had that on here. I do not.
Not a big deal. It will be in that email. Everyone who attended will get an email tomorrow with a link to this video in case they want to watch it again. And we'll make sure we throw your contact information on there. You too. Still welcome back. We're going to be introducing Spencer in just a second. But before we do, I want to encourage you to visit Kates-Boylston.com and look at our events page. On that page, we have all sorts. We do webinars like this with some regularity. We have some really cool in-person things coming up in the future, which if they're near you, they're always worth attending. And one more little shout out to my own podcast, which is called Funeral Service Insider. You can get it on YouTube or you can get it on your phone, iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you just type Funeral Service Insider, the podcast will come up. You can subscribe, and whenever it comes out, you'll have a notification. You won't have to look for it. This is Spencer Larkin, and he will be presenting for the next hour or so. Again, any questions you have during the presentation, feel free to type them in. I'll collect them and read them out as is necessary or possible. I'm sorry. You're on your own, Spencer. I'll be back with questions as a voice from above, and then I'll poke my big red head back in when the presentation has come to an end. So take it away. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I was getting worried there for a minute if my screen wasn't showing. So I am really glad that you can see it. And just to make sure it's the right screen, it says Envision Strategic Partners beyond the service using aftercare and community
That's what
engagement.
everybody says. That's what everybody says. It's just I have a frozen screen. So there you go.
Perfect. All right. Well, I am excited to be sharing. My name is Spencer Larkin. I'm the CEO of Envision Strategic Partners, and we help families pre-plan. We're a third-party marketer, so we work with the funeral homes and really enjoy just being a difference, making a difference in people's lives. Greg did a great job at presenting, and so it's going to be hard to follow him, but I will do my best. So thinking about it, beyond the service. So a lot of things happen. Number one, community events. Why are they important? Ask yourself this. They're creative ways to get your name out in a cost-effective manner. They help with branding. They help with getting people just to want to utilize your services. They help with pre-planning if done right. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. I'll talk all about that. I'll also talk about aftercare. This is the best referral source you have as it endears families to you. Now, not only is it a good referral source, but every family that we work with on our aftercare process, if the funeral home is having surveys, at-need surveys, those survey scores go up, particularly in like support and follow-up, overall satisfaction, those types of issues and value. And so it's a really good thing for both pre-need and at-need. That's one of the things that we have really found is combining the two. It used to be this us versus them mentality, pre-need versus at-need, and helping them work together to be all serving the same client families. Aftercare is one of the best ways to do that, and it's also the most effective pre-need lead source. Hospice outreach. This is not as much about pre-need, but more about kind of the branding, getting your name out, influence the influencers, education. It really does help on referrals on the at-need side, which then could learn to lead to pre-need sales, but it's not an immediate pre-need referral source. Now, you might get referrals, but you're going to probably write those on an annuity or another type of payment, maybe a trust, to help those families because the death is a little bit more imminent. So, and then we'll talk about some of the tools of engagement that we utilize. Our personal wishes organizer. I did the acronym with PWO, and then crafting your legacy kit as well, which is something that we've been utilizing. So first off, aftercare and community outreach are powerful tools funeral homes can use to build market share by fostering trust, strengthening relationships, and differentiating themselves in the competitive industry. Sounds pretty good. Now, it's simple, but it's not easy. That's the hard part. Is we're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. We can do this, but execution. And so we'll give you our recipe book, but following that can be sometimes a difficult process. So number one, community outreach creates visibility and credibility. It involves participating in local events, offering educational seminars, like the importance of pre-planning, sponsoring causes, or simply being active in local civic groups. Greg talked about that. Going to churches, being speakers, Rotary, some of those other things. Not only is it getting your name out, but it's also helping make a difference. And so we want to think about the why, the passion in it. And so if we're doing these things, make it fun. Like, get the people engaged. And so really getting it, it could be job fairs is something, it could be a expo, uh anything like that. It really, really takes off. And you got to look at the right events, obviously, but being there and helping people to see your name again in the community really, really does help. So even being a sponsor on certain events, that's more of a branding issue, but it can lead to pre-need as well. So some of the examples that I said, lunch and learns, obviously we've all done those, but there's so many ways to do it. You could do it at a restaurant. You could have it catered at a funeral home. You could do a virtual event with where you send them a gift card. We actually, particularly during COVID, had so much success with that, where we would have the event run for 24 hours where they could watch it. We could see that they watched it. We'd send them the card. We had one event that had 73 people attend because of that. And then when there's non-attendees, then we'd follow up and give them the gift card. And so you've got to be creative. But again, utilizing the tools. Greg talked about a CRM. We utilize our CRM all the time to make sure that we're following up and not letting things slip through the cracks. And so it's working smarter, not harder. That's very, very important. Flower events. We've done a lot of these, particularly at certain times like Mother's Day. We'll partner with a local florist, and in the funeral home, we'll invite people to come in and they'll make their own flower arrangements for their family. It's really fun. It's interactive. We'll have some drinks and hors d'oeuvres, stuff like that. But that has been something that has gotten people not only enjoying it, but in the funeral home. Sometimes that's really scary and hard to get people into the funeral home. Bingo, bowling, movie events. We've done so many movie events, and we have filled theaters of 500 people, sometimes where we've had to get second theaters because we filled them. This is a great event, especially for branding in the community. You rent out a theater at an off time, like a Tuesday afternoon, and you can pick any new releases or some old classics, and that's what makes it fun because people want to come. You get seniors out, you get different people, you have drinks and popcorn, and you have them fill out a survey card. And we make that fun. We'll say, stuff like, we'll only call you 38 times. Don't worry, it's not going to be a bother. But it's really great. We don't get as much pre-need off of that as much as the at-need branding. And so those are really great. Senior picture days, we've hired a professional photographer. A lot of times, seniors don't have that opportunity. And to get dressed up and to have some fun and be with some of their friends, it's a great event. We've done that at senior centers. We've done it at the funeral home. Most commonly, we do it at the funeral home. Donuts and paint. You can kind of picture that, how messy that gets in a lot of different ways. Coffee and donuts, cookies and conversation, ask the expert. It goes on and on. But these are some great examples of how we can share in the community with events that are not only geared for pre-need, but also to really help the funeral home at the same time. Community events increase brand awareness in a positive, non-salesy way. We're not trying to sell. It's just like prospecting. You don't try to sell on the phone or you're never going to get an appointment. It's really about getting the contact information so that then you can set the appointment. We like to set the appointment at the event. We don't wait to make the call. That's one extra step. And so that's something that you can take away from this. When you're at the event, for instance, at a lunch and learn, you and your associates go around and set the appointments that day. That makes it huge because when the you strike the hammer while the iron is hot, they want to schedule it. And chances are then when you have support and follow up with some text message reminders and ringless voicemails, again utilizing the CRM, you make sure that you get those appointments, and then it really helps that way. It builds credibility and positions the funeral home as a trusted local resource. Opens the door from one-on-one conversations about pre-planning in low-pressure settings. And it's a lot easier when you're with your peers sometimes to have some of those questions answered. Ask the expert is a really good one because sometimes you can be educating the hospice workers on that. We'll talk about that a little bit as I talk about hospice. Having them come through the crematory, asking all the questions. It really helps them to see it so that they can make referrals. It differentiates the funeral home from competitors that may not be as involved. And people are more likely to pre-plan with a funeral home they recognize and associate with community care. Now, again, we don't want to over-associate. Sometimes we inundate people over and over with mail or some other form of advertising to a point where it gets bothersome. And they're like, you know what? I was going to use brand X, but now I'm going to use XYZ because of that. And so again, providing some value in the outreach really helps. And people say, these are just smaller groups. You're not reaching as many people, but you can. We've gotten so many people at different events, particularly if they're educational seminars, grief seminars, bringing in an expert, those types of things. Both community events and aftercare support pre-planning growth. Why is pre-planning important? Because it's a competitive market. We have to capture the market share. It's so hard in so many industries. Our margins are getting cut more and more with inflation and everything else. And so securing those pre-need contracts is one of the most important things we can do for the longevity of the business. And both aftercare and outreach give you regular, meaningful touch points with the public. This allows you to introduce pre-planning gently and naturally. That's the key, is make it natural, make it normal, and having those conversations rather than cold calls or ads. Now, do we still call? Greg showed some great figures of having a 1/2 appointment more each day with the 5 calls, or the 1 day of calling. 360,000, I think, was the total volume, which led to like 28,000 and change in sales at an 8%. That's huge. So you still got to do those things, but it's doing everything all at once. And so sometimes you look at what's more effective. That's the hard part, is you see, oh, I'm just going to do this because it pays off not as much as the other. And so doing all of it is what's important. The consistency, the habits, the right habits. And so piggybacking on what Greg said, so offering free pre-planning guides at events or during aftercare follow-ups is a subtle but effective way to spark interest. We don't give our pre-planning guides out. Now we'll give them some materials like a teaser, but we talk about how important it is to really be guided through our personal wishes organizer. And so that's the way we set up the appointment. We'll give them the teaser, and then we'll come out and give them that gift. And then they can give their children the gift of pre-planning, which is such a blessing. In fact, we had one client that was pre-planning, and she was this cute lady, and she said, I just want you to know, I'm spoiling my children after the fact, and they won't even know what a great thing I've done for them until it's that point in time. And I couldn't have summarized Preneed better. And so really helping people to have those opportunities through the community events is of the utmost importance. And again, be creative, have some fun, and look at your local markets on things that might work there. Okay. And if there's any questions on community events, I know I'll get stopped, but I'm going to jump back to aftercare. So think about this. What does aftercare mean to you? There's so many possibilities. You could go all the way down the rabbit hole with really looking at the estate planning, so on and so forth. And there's so many groups and so many things out there that we can utilize for that. But most people don't want it that depth. Again, offering all the options is very important. In pre-planning, we always say every family has the right to say no to the very best. It's not high pressure. It's just presenting and letting them make the options. We don't care whether they choose a cardboard container or a mahogany casket. It's what's right for them, but allowing them to make the choice and presenting the options. So often we try to push them into where we think they want to go rather than just listen. So aftercare, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we utilize aftercare. And we do it in a way that really works with our partners as well. If people want to add more into it, then we can integrate more. But this is kind of the basic aftercare. And it really does help endear the families to you. So aftercare refers to the services and support offered to families after a funeral. This can include grief support groups, follow-up calls, remembrance events, newsletters, and resource referrals. What I found it brought also to the forefront was people that weren't satisfied. A lot of times we had what I would consider assassins, but we would get the feedback because of aftercare, and I would be able to call them, work through it, and some of those people became our greatest advocates for the funeral home. And so it's very, very important to have some type of an aftercare service. The purpose of after-service care or aftercare is to provide exceptional service far beyond the expectations of our client families. It doesn't stop at the service. That's sometimes a surprise to people. Now, other people may want it to stop, but they'll let you know, and they still appreciate that you tried and the efforts. So our goal is to ensure that every family we serve is receiving the same level of genuine care following the service, cremation, or cemetery services. As we create a system for effective post-funeral touch points, we will extend our exceptional service far beyond the date of the funeral service. And that's key. And a touch point could be anything. It could be it could be a call, it could be a physical visit, it could be a letter. There's so many ways, an email. And so making sure that we're still remaining present in their lives and knowing that we're there to support them is very important. So how does it help? Number one, it builds emotional connections during a vulnerable time. They've already gone through it. During the service, families have everybody calling them. There's support. And then after the service, so much of that drops off because it's an afterthought. Yet at the funeral home, we don't want that to drop. And when you do aftercare, it can't be a pre-planning pitch. It has to be genuine aftercare, actually giving them some value. And then the pre-planning can come, but that's secondary or even tertiary at times. It encourages word of mouth referrals from grateful families. It keeps the funeral home top of mind when pre-planning is relevant. Again, I put when. And so the timing of bringing up pre-planning that I'll talk about, but also making sure that you're giving that value and it doesn't feel like a bait and switch. It positions the business as compassionate and service-driven, not transactional. When families feel supported by beyond the funeral service, they're far more likely to return or recommend the funeral home. So regardless of whether they pre-plan with the aftercare, it still leaves that taste in their mouth that they'll tell others how great the funeral home was, and also they'll come back when the time is needed. So introducing aftercare. This needs to happen at the arrangement conference. Whenever possible, the funeral director and aftercare rep should meet and greet the family together. Now, as Greg said, we're professionals. We're out in the community. We're on appointments. That's not always feasible. And so there's other ways to do that. You could present the aftercare consultant by having like a printed page that talks a little bit about them and what they do. And that's one way so that when you do call, it makes it a little bit easier for the introduction. Talking about the aftercare rep's role, utilizing an intro card in the folder like I was talking about if the individual's not there. And then what we have is we call it the immediate family contact sheet or IFC form. A lot of times aftercare is only optional for the next of kin. That's not ideal because there's so many family members that might need help, people that are struggling with grief. And so what we do is we gather all the names of the services of all the names of the family members in the arrangement conference. And sometimes they'll put family members that aren't there, and I'll tell you how we do that. So that's really important. The aftercare rep obviously doesn't stay through the arrangement conference. He's introduced or she's introduced, and then you're able to move forward. But it's good if you can make that physical introduction. So the beyond the informant is what we call it. The purpose of the immediate family contacts form is number one, we want to offer grief and healing support resources through a variety of organizations. We've used For Grief. We also will send out like the Mourner's Bill of Rights, some things like that that are actually really simple, but again, very liberating when people are grieving. Depending on the funeral home with us, we will compile lists of local grief groups and help them doing that. Sometimes we'll go through like a whole aftercare guide that's very lengthy that we've developed for certain funeral homes. And then we'll send a link to the online obituary. We also send a condolence card that's signed by the funeral director and the aftercare consultant. And oftentimes with the funeral director, when they're not used to the aftercare program and the family is at the funeral, they'll say, "Wow, thank you so much for that condolence card. That was really nice." And the funeral director's thinking, "I don't know what you're talking about, but you're welcome." Well, then they're integrated in Preneed because it's making them shine. They see that their customer satisfaction is getting better. And so you can see it becomes this fluid circle where we're serving not only the families, but we're also serving the Attendees directors to help make us one team. So oftentimes, you know how possessive funeral directors and pre-need consultants can get over their families, this is a way to really help us to work together. So it also helps make the family aware of special memorial events like Memorial Day, Grief and the Holidays, Veterans Day events, anything like that. We can utilize that aftercare platform to help them be aware of those types of resources, and then just strengthens relationships with cards, letters, text messaging, check-in calls, so on and so forth. And again, you can customize the aftercare to whatever suits your organization best. But we have in each arrangement room a clipboard that has copies of the immediate family contacts form. We do this in all the funeral homes that we work with, and that if you just hand the clipboard to the family and ask them to fill out their contact information, it's pretty easy. You could just have that clipboard and say, one thing that we'll do is we'll have times where we need to contact you, and sometimes if Jill, who's the next of kin, is not available, we may need to get a hold of some of the other family members, and we'll also be following up with you with some of the grief support and aftercare services. And so if you just fill that out, pass it around, and then from there we create a whole workflow to help the pre-need counselors know when to call and a little bit of that background. So introducing the IFC form, there's three key points. It's helpful to have more than one contact on file in the event we need to reach the family. So I just kind of talked about that. Number two, we'll be sending you a link to the obituary, so on and so forth. Following the services, we'll be sending some very helpful and important information. Will each of you please include your contact information in this form? And then ask, is there anyone not here today that we should include? That's one of the most important things to really capture aftercare, because there's other family members that might be flying in. Now, are those family members that are flying in or not there, the services going to pre-plan? Chances are probably not. But again, aftercare, it's not about pre-planning. It's really about care. And when they see that, they may give you referrals. As we talked about, Greg said asking for referrals. Again, in the aftercare process, it really gives you some opportunities for that when the time is appropriate. So gently plant the idea of pre-planning. I know the last thing on your mind right now is your own arrangements, but I can assure you that in the next few weeks or months, you will think about writing down some of your own wishes. When that time comes, we will deliver a very helpful planning book to help you write down your thoughts. For now, however, we'll focus on taking care of things for your husband, wife, so on and so forth. That's something that could be said during the arrangement conference. Again, when you're doing aftercare, you don't want to bring preneed up, especially early on. We actually do not bring preneed up until the 45-day mark. That's the earliest, unless the family brings it up. This is probably the only statement that might be said up to that. Okay, so we'll send out the online obituary as we gather all the information. Then we'll send out a condolence card. I'm tripping over my words. And this is just very nice. It's something simple. Please accept our deepest sympathies for the loss of your loved one. Our thoughts are with you, so on and so forth. But they appreciate it. Again, it shows a little bit of care from the funeral home. And the thing is we make pre-need so easy so that it's all done. It's automated. We just make sure that it happens for every family that each of our funeral homes work with. So, additional steps completed by the support staff and the aftercare rep. First, we send out the aftercare letter with the mourner's bill of rights, and that's mailed 7 days after the service. And that mourner's bill of rights, it comes at that time where they're confused. They're like, should I be over this? Like, what's going on? I'm still feeling so lost and so helpless. My whole world's falling apart. It gives them the permission to mourn in their unique and individual ways, and then some helpful hints. And that's a very, very nice page that we send out. A call task will be added to follow up with the letters with the letter 7 days after. And so what we do is again, utilizing the CRM, we create what we call a workflow or an auto flow. So as we input the family's names, there's call tasks where the aftercare consultant will call each family on specific days. And so as Greg talked about making the calls, this is a little different because it's not prospecting. It's serving and making sure that everything went well, asking how the service went. We have scripts and dialogue to help go through that, but finding out if they've gotten their death certificates, if there's an issue with the headstone, all of those things that we can then serve them and make sure that they get the care that they need. The first aftercare visit, we talk about your journey forward. This is This is a tool that we actually utilize. It's provided from Homesteaders because they're our insurance provider, and it's just a great tool. And so you can get something like that where it's created individually or through different groups to help them, just kind of like the next steps in the aftercare process. We also use the Seasons of Change guide that is also something that we can get free of charge from Homesteaders. And so we're utilizing those tools to make sure that we're providing services. It talks about, closing out bank accounts, some of the friendly reminders and things that they might need to do, and then giving them pointers on how to do that. A mail task is created to send a passive pre-need approach. This is the 45-day mark. And so we've already had several points of contact, and we send out what we call a gift of protection or certificate of appreciation, and then we follow up 7 days after that. We know that this works because as we send out that second letter with the gift of protection, and the aftercare consultant hasn't called the family, oftentimes we'll have families calling the funeral home saying, I don't want this to expire and we want a pre-plan. And so we're thinking, all right, shame on us for not following up, but the process works. And then we send email reminders, go out automatically to remind the aftercare consultant to complete the tasks. We'll also send a letter on the 1-year anniversary date. And then with all of the names that we gather through this aftercare process, if the funeral home is doing an event, again, Grief in the Holidays or Memorial Day, or some special grief expert that's coming into town, we can email all of those people on behalf of the funeral home and make sure that they're able to reach their clients for those events. But both the funeral director and the aftercare rep are recognized throughout. And so again, it keeps them top of mind awareness for the services that were provided. And then when a survey comes out, which is usually a couple weeks after the service, it's still fresh on their mind. And so it really helps with that process. So the aftercare letter that's 7 days after the service, it's just pretty basic letter, talking to them about what we're going to provide, wishing them well, appreciating the opportunity to serve, the trust that they've given the funeral home, and then the mourner's bill of rights. So you can see on that, you have the right to experience your grief in your own experience, your own unique grief. You have the right to talk about your grief. You have the right to feel a multitude of emotions. You have the right to be tolerant of your physical and emotional limits. So it goes on, but just these really basic, good things that provide value. That little document, being shorter than longer, is actually what they can read. Most funeral homes have resources where there's articles on the website that they can talk about. There's a lot of grief experts in the industry that have specifically created those platforms. There's also things like For Grief, where people can go on and get extended grief service. And then we want to make sure that if they're struggling with some of the healing process, getting them in with a therapist, a grief counselor, or a grief group that's local in the community. And again, working with hospices to partner on that really goes a long way. And that'll be part of what I talk about regarding the hospice approach. So the aftercare visit, your journey forward, it's a thoughtfully curated aftercare kit designed to guide families through grief and gently introduce pre-planning. It's a turnkey programs included collateral, practical tools, and training frameworks. So it's really, really a good way to give them, again, something of value. The Seasons of Change is something that we've used as well. This is kind of round 2 of that we're just utilizing at this point in time. And then we can send this gift of protection letter that has like a maybe a $200 discount on the pre-need. And it talks about pre-need for the first time in this letter. It says, we recognize that it is still certainly an emotionally sensitive time for you, but have found that families we serve choose to ease their loved ones' future burdens by making their own final arrangements in advance. To help you get started, I have enclosed a gift of protection valued up to $250 towards the purpose of your prearranged funeral or cremation plan. That's, again, unless the family has brought it up, the first time that we bring up pre-need, but they see it as a benefit, knowing what they've gone through, and they can see how much easier that can make it for some of their children. We also send the Thinking of You, the date of death anniversary card. And so this is just something saying that we're still thinking about you and your loved one. And that's actually a really, really nice touch. Again, it's all automated, because if somebody was having to think about doing it, it's not going to happen, or it might happen a certain percentage of the time. It might be late. But once we put it in the CRM, we then have that auto flow go directly to our vendors that send that out. And again, it's signed by the funeral director and the aftercare. So, jumping on to hospice relationships. It's important for funeral homes to have relationships with hospices for several compassionate, practical, and business related reasons. Number one, the continuity of care. Families are comforted knowing there's a trusted funeral provider. If we, as a funeral home, can create those relationships and gain the referrals and show them, again, having some of the community events specifically for professionals, whether those are CEU hours to help social workers or nurses, that's a great way to present professionally to get them to be advocates for your funeral home. Also, having them come in, asking the questions, showing them your facilities is such a benefit so that they can make those referrals. And you do get referrals for pre-need as well, but it's more of a ad need situation because they're working with people that are, in their last days. So hospice staff do become close with families and they're influencers. And so their recommendation goes a really, really long way. Also streamlining some logistics. If you're familiar with the hospice, they're familiar with you. It can make the removal process so much easier and better with respect and dignity for the family and their loved one when they see how much quality you give and you provide. It also gives feedback if you have that professional person that might be there at the removal or through the process and they give you feedback, it can really help improve our system so that we can serve the client better, because sometimes the client families aren't able to give feedback at that time. And also providing educational opportunities like I talked about. We can offer grief training, memorial options. They always do like a yearly or maybe a semi-annual memorial event for their clients that they have lost. We can partner with them. We can sponsor those events. We can do things to really support them in the community. And also, again, bringing in an expert to give the continuing education hours is a huge benefit, or getting your presentations approved by the state for that makes it even better. And so that's something that we have helped, many of our clients do as well. So continuing on with that, we could host a hospice appreciation luncheons or breakfast, thank them for their work, share their services, and just build familiarity. That's a little different than just taking donuts in and getting past the gatekeeper and trying to build relationships. But having that community relationship liaison in the funeral home is very important. Again, the CEUs are one of the best ways to really get hospices to appreciate what you do, because number one, it's not fun getting CEUs. If you can make it fun and do it for free or a very cheap cost, they remember that. And it's a real benefit to the community to provide those services and to get some of the hospices that may not interact as much introduced to each other, because it could be like a bigger event. And so it shows you as a partner, not just a service provider. Co-hosting community grief support groups with hospices. We would work with many different hospices and co-host their events to help them and make sure that they were done. Hosting them, offering to host them at the funeral home. Sometimes that can be hard because you have viewings and different things, but oftentimes there's reception centers nowadays at funeral homes, and so making sure that they have those options. Attend and support hospice fundraisers and memorial events. They have sponsor walks, they have vigils, memorial services. Like, that's important because not only have they lost their loved ones, we've served them, and it shows that we care. And so being present at those things is very, very worthwhile. Offering staff time, saying we can help you and provide some of our staff to help with some of the resources, whether that's just setup, financial support, or materials like candles, flowers, programs. And that gives you an opportunity. You can also reach out to some of your vendors, say, here's an opportunity to get your name out there as a florist, and you can get the flowers donated, but then you can get them to the funeral home. So there's a lot of ways to work with partners to just enhance and deepen those relationships and build the trust with the hospice groups. But be present without being salesy. Nobody wants a salesman. In fact, that's some advice that we give to our sales counselors. We're salespeople, but we don't focus on sales. It's education. It's not high pressure. That's one of the things that we really look at for pre-need is our persistency. How many people, there's going to be some first year deaths or cancellations, but if you have a lot of cancellations, like 70% persistency and 30% are canceling, it shows high pressure and that hurts the funeral home. And so again, how you present and the timing of it is so important. Like I said, we don't bring up pre-need until the 45-day mark on aftercare because it's not the right timing. We have to build those relationships first. You could create a hospice outreach role in your organization, someone on your staff to be the primary point of contact. They can go out and visit. They can maintain those relationships, and it doesn't just have to be hospices, but Rotary groups and things like that as well. Oftentimes, some of that can overlap where the pre-need counselor wants to help and assist, and so then it again creates that collaboration within the organization where people are working together and building those relationships and understanding one another to see that we're all helping to serve the family. Celebrate the hospice, National Hospice and Palliative Care Month, which is November, which a lot of us don't even know. They have months for everything nowadays. And this is a really good one, though, because they do give. Sometimes caring for the caregiver is the most important thing we can do because, as you know, as funeral directors or pre-need counselors, it's a grind. Greg talked about Mondays and Thursdays were his visit night. Tuesday was his call night. Well, there's 3 nights out of the week, and he's juggling kids and doing everything else. There is also flexibility with that, but it's always on. And so giving them appreciation goes such a long way. Letting them know and building those relationships, gift baskets, handwritten thank you notes or comfort items are very important. Again, dropping off donuts and coffee or something to that effect as well. Feature them in your newsletters or social media as community heroes. Again, you don't want to isolate any hospice either. You want to make sure that you're spreading the love. And so building those relationships with everybody to make sure that you're situated and aware in the right manners. Offer tours and Q&A sessions. This is so good to get them into the facilities because when they see the quality of your care, the cleanliness, the whole process, it's no longer a mystery to them. They don't know what they don't know. So what do they recommend on? Price, which is not always the best thing. Value is of so much more importance. And so when they can see that the family will never leave your care, those types of things will really go a long way. And so making sure that you have them behind the scenes, educate them on your processes, how you support your families, and how they can see that the families they care for are going to continue to be supported. Again, they're possessive. They're close. Sometimes it's like they're losing their own family members. And so those memorial services that they have, they're continually mourning and grieving. It's hard to be that caregiver. And so helping them, giving them some respite is one of the best things that we can do. And it really helps to grow yourself in the community as well. So again, collaborate on educational seminars for the public. So those are some ideas: Veterans Day, Memorial Day, a grief in the holidays type thing. With this, the liaison needs to be aware of who they're working with. Hospice organizations are all organized with social workers and nurses. They're probably the primary ones that are going to be making the referrals. However, they're also sometimes the hardest ones to get to. So the director of nursing, the chaplains, the aides, community liaisons, volunteers, the doctors. How do we get each one of them to know us? It's again through the events. It's through the continuing education. It's being present, and just like Greg's habits, it is consistency. You have to be consistent. If it's, oh, we're going to hit you really hard here and then never come back and then hit you again, it just doesn't fly. Same thing with aftercare. We have to be consistent in that process. And so that's why doing these things and creating the habits of following up on them is so important. And then with the community events, making sure that there's the follow-up. We didn't set the appointment at the time. Are we going to make sure that we call them in a timely manner so that we can get them? Again, presenting to the hospice, introduce yourself in the funeral home. Let them know about the affordability. Sometimes people think, well, if they're the highest price funeral home, they don't have other options. There's a myriad of options. Sometimes when I was on the at-need side and people would call about cremation, they'd say, "How much is your cremation?" I'd say, cremations go anywhere from $895, and I've seen them as high as 30,000. I doubt either one of those options is right for you. May I ask you a few follow-up questions so that I can actually make the right recommendation and let you know what the cost would be realistically? And they're like, yeah. And so then you get in this conversation, you build the trust. So again, helping the hospice people to see that as well, going through the processes, talking about our aftercare, talking about pre-planning, how important that is. One of the things we've actually had is as we've created these programs, a lot of the hospice workers will pre-plan, and that's a younger age, a younger demographic. It's usually a multi-pay. And so it's like these really good things that come of it as you're doing it with the right intent. Again, it's not to sell, it's to help and provide value. So you can bring a hospice info sheet, branded swag, brochures, cards, food, all of those types of things to your visits. Quarterly awards are awesome. Doing it on your newsletter, recognizing somebody in the hospice community for their service makes them feel like $1,000,000. Doing it, going in and doing like a big celebration of a certain staff member at the hospice, it's so good to help them. And also just it makes you feel good knowing that you're making a difference in the community. You can post online to promote their company. You can purchase and customize the award and those types of things. So again, just support the hospice workers. You enhance our aftercare. It's a soft pre-plan opportunity, but we really want to make sure that we're in all of these places: hospices, skilled nursing, independent living, assisted living, memory care, in-home health, and hospice. What a great thing there, and senior centers. And so Greg talked about some of those events that would overlap for pre-planning as well. So I want to now just talk about some of the tools that we use. Everybody has some type of a planning guide. Ours is called a personal wishes organizer. And we actually create our sales process all around this. We help create emotional urgency with the right questions. For instance, asking somebody, if you, heaven forbid, if you and Joe passed away today, or as you're driving home, who's going to come in and take care of the arrangements, and what would that be like? Have them paint the picture. It really helps. And so we talk about the umbrella of protection. If they can't afford it all, we can look at like the pie. Let's just look at funeral services first, and then we can go to the casket and kind of bite off one chunk at a time if that's what they need to be within their budget. That is huge. If people can't afford, they're not going to afford it. They're not going to be able to afford it at the funeral. And so helping them to give that gift to their family is such a blessing. And so knowing the why, as you're talking about in the arrangement conference, the pre-planning conference, or as you're just prospecting, have that professional courage, because you know what a great gift it is. And so as you're making the calls, as Greg talked about, creating the habits, how do you do that? It's having that emotional courage, knowing the why behind. You're giving up a gift. Again, they don't know what they don't know. And so that education process, but we really utilize this tool. And so creating those tools, having those, looking at different tools throughout the industry that can help your families to get the best service possible. We again use the Seasons of Change. This is an aftercare checklist. It has a survey. This is something that is provided to us through homesteaders. Luckily, too, at Envision, so Wanda Sizemore was kind of the trainer at Homesteaders and created Seasons of Change, and she's in her retirement now. She works with us at Envision, and she's our onboarding specialist. And so we have this added value where the creator's with us, and so we really utilize the Seasons of Change and have some great training for people. But find the tool that's right for your family and how that you can better benefit them. So I know that I've kind of gone through everything. I'm open for any questions. Usually it's more interactive where I have a lot of questions throughout. And so I was kind of gearing for that and also trying to get everything done in the right time. But here is my contact information. And do we have any questions?
Well, we are still taking questions, that's for sure. We have a couple of people who want to make sure that they can get their hands on those cool documents, the personal wishes organizer and some of the aftercare documents, and they're going to be part of this presentation that we send with the email, I believe, right? But if not, they can reach out to you and get copies of whatever they need.
Yeah, we'd love to present. Again, these are things that most of it that we've created in-house, but we're happy to to show those to you, yeah, you just reach out to me and we'll get those for you.
Excellent. And do we have any more questions? I think everybody was too busy taking notes. I would like to ask the same question of you. What are your best practices in asking of referrals? This was the person who asked last time.
Well, I can't top Greg. No, I'm just kidding. For referrals, really it's getting in the habit of asking and placing that at the right time. I really believe it's about timing. If you ask too early, it feels like kind of icky, if you will. And if you ask too late, it's like almost an afterthought. And they're like, okay, so it's before you've closed the contract. So you've presented everything. You've made the appropriate recommendations. Basically, you have the pre-plan and you're getting ready to make the close, asking them how they're going to pay, which again, making sure that that's a seamless process that we train on. And then at that moment, you ask, as you've done this and see what a benefit that is to you. I'm sure this is a great relief. You have any other friends or family that you think would benefit from these services? That's kind of how we do it. But again, it's the placement of it in the arrangement conference. So I hope that was helpful.
It looks like it was. There's someone else who wants to know about getting the Seasons of Changes flyer. You've got all sorts of great toys people are very impressed with.
Good. The tools are always good. Again, we will get that for you. Just reach out to me and we can send those out. That is a packet that was created by homesteaders, and so we get it through homesteaders. But we're happy to send it to you as well. And I know homesteaders would be fine with that.
Excellent. Are there any more questions that don't have to do with taking Spencer's stuff?
Yeah, stop stealing my ideas. Just kidding. The good thing, the funny thing here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's a community of abundance, and I'll give you anything that we have because again, it's simple, but it's not easy. That's where our specialties is being able to execute on all of it. And so I just really am glad to share anything. And so it's kind of funny. Some people are like, why are you giving away all your secrets? I said, they're not really secrets,
I saw an interview with a Coca-Cola executive, and they said, what if somebody could reproduce your exact formula? And he said, are they going to put it in a red can?
Yeah, I'm your red can. So
and what were the biggest obstacles in getting these aftercare plans in place?
So getting the aftercare plans in place is we had to over trial and error. It took many years to kind of figure out the right process. We've worked with other groups like Alevia that have done text messaging. We integrate that into the aftercare. We worked with like Full Circle where we can integrate different things. So a lot of different vendors because some people utilize that, but really it took just a lot of time. Now it seems so simple. I'll kind of tell it in the story. Picasso was in a coffee shop and he was doodling on a napkin and just drinking his coffee. And unbeknownst to him, there was some lady there just staring at him and in awe, thinking, how can he do this? Well, he gets up and he's about to crumple up his napkin. And she says, no, stop. Don't throw that away. I'll buy it from you. She says, how much? He says, $10,000. She's like, what? That took you 2 minutes. And he says, no, that took me 30 years. That's kind of how I would say with aftercare. It's the process. And so it's kind of hard to answer the question because it took a lot, but figuring out, we're happy to share our process with you and give you, what we've learned. But it was a very difficult thing to figure out the right touch points, not being too much and not too little. I hope that answered it.
Yes. All right, last call. All right. Well, Spencer, thank you so much. And I'm sure your email box is filling up as we speak, because there were several people that said that they wanted to reach out. So, well, thank you very much. And everyone else, when you get this video, if you have any more questions, you can reach out to Spencer or to Greg, and they'd be happy to answer your questions. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye.